Well, hey guys, welcome back. As the hobby progresses, we get some re-releases of items with more features, different details, and usually as time progresses, those locomotives and rolling stock items just increase in price. But today we're reviewing something very rare, and it's rare because the price has decreased by over 50% since its first release. Courtesy of the Internet Wayback Machine, I want to show you a quick screen capture of what we're reviewing today, which is the Broadway Limited Great Northern S2. Now this locomotive was Broadway Limited's very first brass locomotive. And as you can see, the MSRP was very high. Now we've got an MSRP of under $800 in this locomotive that we're reviewing in the most recent run of the S2 years later. So let's take a look at what you get in the box in Broadway Limited's S2, the most recent release. Now the Brass Hybrid series has longer boxes lately, and that's because Broadway Limited shipping the locomotives with the tender and locomotive already put together, so you're pulling it out as one unit. You're not having to connect tender and locomotive. In the box, Paragon 3 manual with 31 pages of information from CVs to functions, etc. Exploded parts diagram for this locomotive and its tender. Broadway Limited 1-year warranty. This talks about whistle smoke feature for some of the Union Pacific steam locomotives that come equipped with puffing smoke. You can read more about that. I think that's kind of a one-fits-all flyer. I don't know if this one's steam whistle smokes. I don't believe it does. And then there are choo-choo shoes flyers in the box too. Very popular item, very smart item for them to come out with. Bring some kids into the hobby. Now the star of the show, what we're here to look at, the actual locomotive, has that nice felt. Just set this box out of the way here. Slide it out of the container. Hard plastic. Got a little hex key here with some traction tires. And you have a locomotive with some softened plastic, hard plastic, and soft felt supporting it. A little difficult to get this out of the box, and it's going to be hanging off the turntable, but we'll take a closer look on the track. So we're going to fire away with the front of the locomotive. The most prominent feature of the front of the locomotive is the smoke box mounted air pumps that you can see on each side of the bell here. You've got classification lights that are non-operational, but they do have a prism effect, so they capture ambient light and appear to be lighted in some conditions. Lots of plumbing on the front of the locomotive as well. As you work your way down, you've got a handrail, a platform, the headlight, the number board, coupler cut lever, coupler itself, and the pilot. Coupler cut lever, by the way, does rotate up and down. Smokestack, flying number boards up top are also on the front of the smoke box area. You've got the domes as we work our way back, but because we're not on the turntable, we'll reposition and take a side look. Alright, from the side you can see the builder's plate, which is actually somewhat legible. Great Northern on the side of the dome here. A lot of plumbing and handrails along with a platform for the crews to access. Below you've got the drivers, side rods, eccentric crank, and all that detail, along with the pistons and the pilot trucks. So we work our way back to the cab. You'll see that there are cab figures installed. There's roof vents on the cab. Lots of plumbing back here as well. Dynamo, safety pop-off valves, etc. The cab roof vents are fixed, so they do not open and close. Down here you can see all of the rivet detail and the trailing trucks and more plumbing below the cab here. Window is fixed, and I just popped out the window plastic. Great. But outside of that, window is fixed into position. make sure you don't do what I just did with that and pop out the window plastic. So we'll work our way back to the tender, but first a pretty unique feature that you can only see from the side. As you can see by the reflection there to the left, the plastic window fell back in place when I flipped it upside down, so that's good. But from this angle you can see what's called, it's a closed cab, and there's this diaphragm here, and it flexes as you negotiate curves, so it's got spring tension, it can turn left and right, it's got this mechanism here, and that's mimicking the prototype. So this mechanism will flex with the curve. 22-inch minimum radius is what's suggested. And you've also got both the wire connections down here and a little hook connection to couple the tender with the locomotive. Because it comes out of the box with that, we won't separate it and show you, because unless you decide to separate it, there's really no point. Great Northern Railway is on the side of the tender here. You got the slant in the tender there. Walkway up top with some handrails and water hatches. It's also a water hatch right here. I'll show you a top-down view later, but wanted to focus in on the truck detail and side detail of the tender. On the back there's a crew access ladder and a deck for one of the water hatches back here. Top-down view so you can see all of the detail that you couldn't really see from the side. So towards the rear is a lot of plumbing, dynamo, etc., and those fixed roof hatches or roof vents. And there's all the top of the tender detail. On this baby's backside, you've got a rear operating light, crew access ladders, another coupler cut lever, and some air hose brake line detail down there by the coupler as well. I'm going to give you a quick look at the other side of the locomotive, which does have some variations. You can really see all of the plumbing and detail that's right below the walkway here and how that's routed throughout the locomotive. Again, brass construction, brass hybrid, so there's a die-cast chassis, I believe, and a couple of plastic parts, but predominantly brass. And then on this side you can see the crew figures a little more clearly, and there's a boiler backhead and some plumbing inside the cab as well. There's that connection again between the locomotive and tender and the back end. It's really struggling for the name of this, but it is called the vestibule, this connection between the cab and tender. And I want to show you from a top-down view how this works a little better. It took me a few minutes to remember the name, but the vestibule navigates turns and gives this locomotive the capability to navigate 22-inch curves or greater, which is really small actually, because you've even got some easy track and things like that are to 22 inches, but this is just pressure fit up against the locomotive. There's no connections, but when it navigates turns, this will turn with it and allow for like this spring operation, much like diaphragms work. That's why I called it a diaphragm to begin with, but it's a vestibule and it's pressure, spring pressure up against the cab like that, and that's how this locomotive is able to navigate 22-inch curves. We're going to fire up this locomotive. There's a couple of ways to do it with Broadway Limited. Either just begin moving the locomotive, or you can hit F9, which starts the sequence, which is an extended startup sequence. We'll do F9 in this case. So you hear this whole sequence that really ends with the dynamo firing up, which powers all the auxiliary electronics like the headlight. But we're going to listen to some sounds like the bell here. Keep in mind this is a Locomotive from the 1930s, so it has a swinging bell sound there. F2 whistle. Here's the alternate whistle. Coupler slack. Did you see that synchronized puffing smoke there? F4 is air pump. You may hear the Paragon 3 subwoofer, which is separately sold. Gives you a trackside feel. That's a subwoofer at the bottom. You might hear the rumble from that, which accessorizes the sounds. So there's a lot of different sounds. I don't want to cover them all, but those are just a few. We do have a lot of different announcements and background sounds in the higher functions, like F14 through F21. We'll try a couple of those.
You can let on maximum authorized speed. That's Roger. What do you have now? Clear.
And what I really like is Broadway Limited gives you the ability to record a macro and then play it back, which is a sequence of whistle or bell, basically your choice of different sounds and speeds, and then it'll record it, and then you play it back with function 26 and you record it with function 27. I've detailed that in some of my other reviews. We're going to go ahead and move this under slow speed control, see how the synchronized puffing smoke works and the slow speed control of the motor. One speed step. Two. Three. Four. And five. Seems very responsive under slow speeds. This is one speed step in reverse. You can see the rear light lit. I'm keeping close eye on the side rods for you and the driver wheels. Very little hesitation at one speed step. We'll go ahead and focus in on those for you. 2. 3. 4. And 5. Hear the reverser there as we go back into forward. Just going to leave it on 1 there for a second so you guys can see the drivers up close in action. Alright, so that gives you a good idea of slow speed motor control. We'll move on to other tests. I checked NMRA wheels. They are in specs. Same thing with coupler height. Although I don't have my more accurate coupler height gauge that I like to use, I've misplaced it. I did use the NMRA standards gauge to check the wheel flanges and the coupler height. I suggest picking one of those up because it helps you diagnose with derailment problems. Now we're doing a pull test. That may be a record for a pull test. We just had a 13-ounce pull test. Just to give you an idea, each ounce is about 15 pieces of regular rolling stock and HO scale. So you're talking about 180 or more pieces of rolling stock, more than you'll ever need. That might actually be a pull test record. Well, I'm going to give you one more look of the Locomotive before we wrap the review up. It is kind of loud, so I hope you could hear me okay. But this, again, is the Great Northern S2 from Broadway Limited, a brass hybrid locomotive. Just some of the features are really nice, good detail, great pulling power. Could have been a record here on the review channel. Nice details overall. And don't forget that that price has actually come down, so that's pretty rare as well. We'll leave you with a run by. If there's anything I missed, there's a few other reviews of this online from previous runs and even this run. But I'll leave you with a run by, and we'll see you next time right here on my channel. Take care.